I'm the president and CEO, Mary Encris, of Fashion Group. So welcome to everyone to Sense of Direction. We have an amazing and accomplished panel today. Fashion Group is a global organization of professionals in fashion, beauty, home, technology, textiles, and related industries. Our mission is to provide career resources and interesting and informative information to support the careers of our members in our 26 regions. The event is being recorded. And just some housekeeping, some Zoom housekeeping. If everyone would stay muted, that way there's no interference as far as the conversation. All of the questions, please add to the chat. That will be monitored. Additionally, we've got an amazing and accomplished panel, and their bios, extended bios, will be added to the chat. Thank you to everyone. We hope during this time of COVID that you're all well, healthy, and safe. I'd like to thank our panelists, Julia MERRILL, Laura SLATKIN, and Dr. Rachel HERZ for their time on behalf of Fashion Group today. I can't wait for this conversation. And now I'd like to introduce co-chair of the event and Karen Bromley, who heads the social media and marketing firm, the Bromley Group. And she's also an executive member of our Fashion Group board, who will introduce our moderator and colleague, Fashion Group board member, Caroline. Karen?
Let me unmute. Hi, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and I am so proud to introduce Caroline Fabregas, who is the CEO of Scent Marketing. Scent Marketing is a full-service scent and sensory marketing company, and Caroline is a leading authority in the art and science of scents and scent marketing. Her clients have included amazing brands like the Hyatt Hotels and Baccarat and Auberge and Campari, amongst many others. She served for 12 years as vice president of Clarins. She was the beauty director at Prada. She brings enormous innovation, ideas, and marketing to brands. And we're so happy to have her here today to really help lead us through this incredible journey of scents and what scents mean to us today, which is so important in the current situation that we're all in. Anything to make us feel good, feel better, and empowered. So Caroline, thank you so much. I just want to mention one other thing. Caroline has a new, she's also co-founder of a new company called Scent Invent Technologies, which is a new scent innovation firm. So she's really on the leading edge, as our whole panel is. So thank you all for participating. Caroline, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen and Marianne and the whole panel. And for all of you for being here today, and how wonderful to see you. Karen, you actually inspired this event. You were doing some work with the home area, and you really became to understand how important scents are at this really uncertain time for so many, many reasons. So thank you for inspiring this event. And we're so honored to have our amazing panel. So without further ado, I'll just jump in and give a quick introduction to our panelists. And again, as Marianne mentioned, their bios are to be seen in full in the chat section. Then we'll get right into the questions because the subject matter is really, I think, scintillating. Hope you'll find it that way too. And don't forget to put those questions into the chat because we will have time at the end for questions. So it is my really distinctive honor and pleasure to welcome our first panelist, Laura SLATKIN, who is the founder and executive chairman of Nest Fragrances, a pioneer and a driving force in the home fragrance industry since 1992. In 2008, Laura launched Nest Fragrances, a collection of home scents conceived and designed for consumers with a true affinity for home fragrance. And Laura's also really succeeded in the fine fragrance area, well, in so many areas, and Laura, we're just so delighted that you could make the time to be with us today. I know everyone's so eager to hear how you've been doing and really to celebrate with you the success of your company. We're also very honored to have Dr. HERZ with us, Rachel HERZ, who I have known over the years and has been a huge supporter to me and my late husband, Harold. Thank you, Rachel. And Dr. HERZ is a neuroscientist, a leading world expert on the psychological science of smell. She has conducted research on the sense of smell, emotion, perception, motivated behavior, and cognition since 1990. And as you'll see today, there are many, many books that she has under her belt as well. And I'm so fascinated to hear some highlights from those. I hope we have time to get to that part as well. And Julia MERRILL, Director of Marketing and Consumer Insights, North America IFF. And thank you, IFF, who's a valued board member of Fashion Group and an incredible supporter to the organization and a wonderful partner to Scent Marketing as well. So Julia MERRILL is the Director, as we said, of Marketing and Insights. So we thought it would be really important to have you with us today. Julia brings 20 years of experience in the fragrance industry, and she's held many, many roles within IFF and has really helped to provide a unique perspective on the art and science of scent development. So please join me in welcoming our panel. If we were in person, we can have a round of applause, but I'll just do a quiet one here to welcome everybody. Let's get right into our questions. So our first question is a general one that's open to all panelists. We will go one panelist at a time. And the first question is really to ask you, how have you seen the pandemic affect the importance and actually the recognition of scent? And how is it changing in your individual areas or your individual businesses? And maybe, Rachel, we could go to you first to answer that all-important question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Caroline, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's really great to be here. And so from a scientific perspective, what I'm actually bizarrely or ironically excited about is that COVID-19 has really brought our sense of smell into the fore from both a public perspective and a scientific perspective, because as I'm sure you all know, one of the key symptoms of COVID-19 is losing your sense of smell. So I'm excited that people are actually finally paying attention to smell, and fortunately for the most part, this symptom is usually the case for more milder cases or asymptomatic cases, and it's a transient loss. But I've been told by people who've had this symptom that it is absolutely the worst of any symptom they had with this illness, because they realized how amazingly important their sense of smell was. And one of the other things that I've noticed is that because as we're not going out and socializing as much, and we can't even really put on very much makeup because our mask gets in the way, that smell has actually taken on a different sort of role for people. It's really much more connected to comforting, to connecting to other people, and actually to bringing our own individual selves joy. And I think it's really important for people to realize that they can really use smell right now to conjure emotions and bring them to places where they may not actually be able to physically travel.
Excellent point. Thank you, Rachel. I think we can all relate to, especially the last two things that you talked about. The sense of smell is such a human smell, and we're not able to have that human interaction that we used to. So that awesome power of aroma is so important in so many ways. And Laura, welcome. Tell us, please, how has the pandemic, this really uncertain time that we've been in, how have you seen it affect your business, your clients? And tell us your thoughts. And we just need you to unmute. That'd be great. Thank you. There you go. She's following the rules. She's muted herself. There we go.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a delight to be with you this afternoon to talk about my favorite topic. But what's interesting for me is that I've been in the business for over 25 years. And when Harry and I first started our first home fragrance company in 1992, home fragrance wasn't part of everyone's lifestyle. So when I started the business, or prior to, I had never burned a scented candle or really experienced home fragrance. And the industry was very, very tiny. And then we launched our business and sort of opened up the world of home fragrance, and the home fragrance business grew over the next 10, 20 years. And today, prior to the pandemic, it was really becoming part of everyone's lifestyle. The home fragrance category has been growing over the past well, 5 or 6 years at a nice rapid rate. But now with COVID-19 and people quarantining, home fragrance has really taken off. And quite frankly, when the whole thing happened, as many businesses have been devastated by the current set of circumstances, we at Nest Fragrances were very concerned with the impact on our business. But fortunately, people are staying home and they're using more home fragrance. I think, when you go to work and you come home and, you're making dinner and you're going out, you do like candles, but when you're home all day, that is your wonderful moment to turn to home fragrance, to learn how to change the mood in your home from room to room, from hour to hour. And people are really enjoying and embracing home fragrance in a very special way.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful time to be in the business, and you certainly are a pioneer and really lead the way for all of us. Thank you. So Julia, you've done such incredible research, and tell us, what has the research that you've done, what is it telling us about fragrance use during the pandemic?
Well, I was hearing Laura saying about, the relationship of fragrances and how it has changed. And I think that fundamentally, this is a very unique moment to really listen to the consumers and to see, what are their needs behind it. And this is basically the idea behind, this very extensive work that we've put together, listening to the consumers in these various stages of the pandemic, right? So we all know that this is a very hard and unsettling moment to live, and we are battling with anxiety and trying to protect ourselves. And it was interesting to see how the products that we are using on the everyday kind of, gaining the prime same direction to protect us, to disinfect, to, hygiene our houses, hygiene our hands, our bodies. So it's really interesting to see and how fragrances are also walking hand in hand with this experience. So within this scenario, what we realize is that we have adopted new habits. It's the overall enhancement of hygiene. And I think that the role of the home has really shifted. So at the beginning of the outbreak, we saw home almost like as being our shelter, where we would protect our families, ourselves, against this world, but we didn't really understand how the virus was taking place. So on top of creating this new ritual of hygiene, that's the moment also where we learn how to live in these new circumstances. So little by little, I think that was interesting to see is how the role of the home evolved from a shelter to something that we were calling home as a headquarter, where life is happening, around us. You are homeschooling your kids, there's pets inside, there's a lot of cooking, a lot of cleaning. So all these different stages of interaction happening. And while you are layering more and providing more hygiene to home, you're also finding some pockets of pleasure and comfort. And that's where I think it's fascinating that we are, behind the science or the making of sense for the home, because it's really it poses a bigger question to all of us on how do we do more good? How are we helping consumers to have that little pockets of comfort or little pockets of pleasure along this moment that it's very, critical and hard for all of us. So understanding this interaction has been an amazing deal of experience for us, which fundamentally, we live in a fragrance house. For those of you who have been in the backstage, we live smelling fragrances out of, little bottles and everything. So it also changed the way that we are doing business, the way that we are evaluating and the way that we are, developing scents for the consumers. But the role of home for me was one of the most interesting things that happened with the pandemic.
So it's so interesting, Julia, thank you for that your research is really showing that scent any longer is not just for the sense of smell and smelling good, but it's really taken a much more functional role. It's much more related to emotion. So moving to our next question here, which is directed to Dr. HERZ, tell us, if you would, because you've done so much research on neurocircuitry, tell us about how the power of scent really does influence our emotions. How does that work?
So the sense of smell is unique among our senses in terms of being directly connected to the parts of the brain where emotion and associative learning and emotional memory all take place. And none of our other senses has this privileged, direct, intimate connection to those parts of the brain. And as a function of this really intimate, immediate reaction that when we smell something, it automatically triggers our experiences of emotion, it is possible to, without even thinking, have smells trigger feelings and places and moods and so forth without even having any thought involved. And that's actually extremely unique. So our sense of smell has this very privileged and intimate connection to the neural substrates of emotion and learning and memory. And this is what makes our sense of smell so incredibly powerful when it comes to triggering our emotions and putting the light bulb on memories from our past, on being able to trigger nostalgia, on being able to bring us into moments where we might have forgotten even existed. And there's many, many unique features of our sense of smell. These are some of the most powerful and wonderful aspects.
So it really is true that lavender isn't just smelling good, but it really can calm and relax you. It can actually work upon your limbic system to give you memories of times of relaxation or to really have that more therapeutic effect.
Yes, but if I can say, that's only if you have those associations to lavender. However, if you never smelled lavender before, or if for whatever reasons did not like lavender, then if you never smelled it before, you wouldn't have any association or emotional reaction. And if you didn't like it, then that connection would be triggered as well. So the point is that aromatherapy works, but only from the point of view that you, the individual, have the emotional connection to the scent. And then if you do, whatever that scent is, and what I think is beautiful about this is people can develop their own personal scent association. So you can take a fragrance or anything that you love and make a specific direct emotional connection to it so that when you smell it again, you can be transported. But if you don't have a connection to a smell, then it doesn't work.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Speaking of emotional connection, next question is for Laura, because scent is so emotional, and most of the time to experience it, you have to smell it. But Laura's been doing an incredible job with a very strong DRTB business with QVC and has a very advanced website as well. So Laura, tell us, how have you been making those emotional connections and scent memories when you don't have that client right in front of you that you can pass a tester to? How have you been working that magic?
Well, I'll answer that question by saying a few things. Number one, the audience has become very sophisticated. So if this was 1992 and we were trying to sell scented candles or fragrance on the internet, it would be challenging because there wasn't a lot of experience on behalf of consumers. But the consumer today is very educated, right? And they know what kind of fragrance they like. Do they like fruity? Do they like floral? Do they want woody? Do they want a spa scent? So they really know what they're looking for, and they can read ingredients and really find what they want on the internet quite comfortably. And then nest fragrances, and this has always been my pet peeve, is I always want to make everything simple for the consumer. So, you know, our home fragrance scents, whether it's grapefruit or Amalfi lemon and mint or Moroccan amber or cedar leaf and lavender, all of these names tell you automatically what the fragrance is. There's no guessing involved with our fragrances when it comes to the names. So that's been, you know, that's quite a fact in terms of the trend that consumers are more sophisticated. But then also on our internet site, our website, we just totally redid our website because we wanted to really talk about home fragrance in terms of moods. What kind of mood does this scent create? Is it invigorating? Does it, you know, create this moment for you? Is it, you know, a enchanted garden? Like what kind of mood does this fragrance create? So we have sort of a mood navigator, if you will, on our website that categorizes fragrance into several different moods. And that's been very helpful. And then through photography, we can almost, you know, it's so funny because when I start to create a fragrance, I start with a mood board. And I will go on Pinterest and the internet and find photographs that really visually describe the fragrance. And I'll put together a mood board. And when I sit down with the perfumer, that's where we start, the mood board. Because the mood, you know, photographs can really tell you what something smells like. We launched a fragrance called Rose Noir and Oud. And, you know, really sexy, sensual. It's a very seductive fragrance with a lot of woody notes and leather and patchouli and rose. And, you know, just photographs can really evoke what kind of a message in terms of selling a fragrance or presenting a fragrance to a consumer. So we use all these sort of tools to convey fragrance. But at the end of the day, consumers are pretty sophisticated. They know their ingredients.
They know their ingredients. And I just want to say, I've had the great opportunity to spend some time with Laura in the past. And I think one of the most compelling things that I've seen you do when you're speaking to the press or speaking to a retailer or even to a customer is you often give them the personal experience. I love the story of how you've been inspired to create some of your fragrances through your cooking experiences, and how you actually almost bring the person into your home with you. And so that's a very deep connection to you, and they can feel that they've almost created the fragrance with you.
Yeah, in fact, if I could spend a moment telling one of my stories, inspiration stories, because it's one of you know, my clients' favorite stories, is one night I was having 40 women to my home for dinner, and I made this Persian Indian buffet dinner. And when we swung open the dining room doors to go into the dining room, someone said, "Oh my gosh, it smells so good in here. What candle is burning?" And I said, "It's not a candle, it's the food." And the next morning I sort of had an aha moment because it really did smell good. And I went down to the kitchen and I gathered all the ingredients that went into cooking those dishes. And I brought those ingredients to the perfumer as inspiration to create the fragrance. And that is how we created Moroccan Amber, which is our #3 scent. And I always say it's very unusual for, you know, usually your top scent, our top scent is bamboo, which is a floral, and our #2 scent is grapefruit, which is fruity. Those are typically your top fragrances. So to have Moroccan Amber as #3 is quite an accomplishment. But yeah, I get inspired all the time in the craziest moments, and that's what I love about the business.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing it, because I think the way you just told that story is exactly what we've been seeing as a way to involve the customer in a fragrance experience when he or she can actually touch it. Just that alone makes us feel like we were all at your house smelling that incredible dish. And can we have the recipe?
Come on over, I'll make it tonight.
Coming on down with our masks and social distancing.
Exactly.
Oh, thank you for that. Julia, we were chatting a bit in our prep about another really interesting sort of effect of this uncertain and unusual time. And that is, how are customers using fragrance and aroma differently? Sort of, have you seen a rise in the bath category? What's happening in how people are maybe treating their laundry differently? Maybe they're at home applying fine fragrance, but maybe they're not, because who are they applying it for? Themselves, perhaps? But are they using fragrance in other ways? What have you noticed?
Yeah, so from a scent experience standpoint that I was mentioning before, all of this happening at the same time at home, you can imagine like what we call the headspace, you know, the experience that we're having by layering all these different products. And one thing that I wanted to point out is consumers, they might be grabbing products that they have the same sort of benefit and end use, so hygiene, disinfecting. But from an olfactive perspective, you have like a multitude of scents that are being experienced, from the pines to the lavenders that Rachel was mentioning about, and then they are burning candles, you know, such as the one that Laura just mentioned. So all of this is happening at the same time in short period of time. So consumers are kind of transitioning in these micro moments inside their homes. So I think that there is a portion of the consumers that the overall experience have led them to fully immerse into either products that they already had home, and then the bathing experience and the showering experience became more mindful, more pleasant, you know, they are taking their times. I think that those are the consumers, they probably don't have, you know, young kids knocking at their doors like, mommy, where are you? But on the other side, you also have more participation and engagement in terms of how you are cleaning your laundry, what sort of, you know, fabric softeners are you balancing with your hygienic product. So it's this beautiful cocktailing that's happening at the consumers, that they are choosing in what level they want to graduate between the disinfecting and the hygiene, and then again as this pockets of pleasure that I was mentioning about. Another thing that I guess it's very important, that while some of those consumers, they may be indulging into new experiences, not all people are today, you know, in the position to have disposable income to invest in those products that are considered a little bit more premium. And that's where you see the importance of scent being delivered into even the most essential products. And I think that this is fundamentally our role, to make sure that, you know, the scent is providing this cue of protection, this cue of hygiene, this cue of comforting at any level and any product price standpoint that we have. So it's really this thinking about these two worlds that are happening, of people that are, you know, living, surviving, having perhaps, you know, less money to get the products that they need to exist, but also people that are, you know, indulging into these little gifts and little pleasures that they have. So how do you create with, you know, putting that consumers in your center of creation so they can have a vast experience from a fragrance standpoint?
Absolutely. I think that I've noticed just for myself and people close to me that because we are home more, we actually are taking more baths. And enjoying that experience because maybe we don't have the commute time, and then exploring some products that are more sensory, maybe a bath oil or even a mist to spray on the shower wall, something that maybe you wouldn't have taken the time to do. I know skincare sales are through the roof, I've been hearing, so that must mean people are using more masks. I think the same is true for fragrance, a lot of ancillary products that maybe weren't as important before. And then I guess one wonders how that will be adapted. Is that something that will be here to stay? That's a very good thought as a future question.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, thank you for that. So Rachel, just coming over to you, as we mentioned in the opening, you have written some terrific books. Maybe you could tell us a bit about some of the books that you've written, some of the research you've done, and give us some of your favorite highlights.
Sure, but can I first like to just add one thing to the whole way that people are using fragrance now, and something I think that people don't realize. And I got the idea from when we were talking at the beginning about this, about how, you know, we don't really feel like we need to necessarily dress up as much, or, you know, the way that we're socializing is kind of restricting the way we might be using fashion in a normal sense. However, as a function of the way that fragrance can make us feel, it can actually change the way we look. You know, the old adage, if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you look great. So this is actually something that I think people should realize and use to their advantage, so that if you have to have a Zoom interaction with someone, it's not just, you know, did I fix my hair or put on the makeup? It's, did I actually do something to myself to make myself feel good? And I'm going to be perceived as more appealing, more attractive as a function of that. And there was even a study done relating to this in terms of, it was young men and women, they were college students, and the women were watching men with video, but the sound turned off. And they had to evaluate how good looking they thought the men were. And half the men were wearing fragrance and half were not. And the women found that all the men that were wearing fragrance were much more appealing than those that were not wearing fragrance, and more appealing than if they just looked at a photo of them. And that's because the men were acting differently. They were acting more confident. They were acting more kind of sexy, I guess. So I think it's really important to realize how we can use fragrance to actually make ourselves feel both better internally and actually project a happier, better version of ourselves. But just to give you some tidbits, as Caroline asked, so I have 3 books that are out currently. I'm working on a 4th one right now. But in order, the first one was called The Scent of Desire. It's discovering your enigmatic sense of smell. So it's everything you ever wanted to know about the psychological science of smell. And I got that idea because I was actually asked to be an expert witness in a case where someone had lost their sense of smell in a traumatic car accident. And this was a young woman. She was in her late 20s, and she had never taken her sense of smell seriously. I mean, she totally, you know, took it for granted and relegated it to the sort of dustbin of the senses, which is what most people do. And it was after she lost it that she realized how incredibly important it was, how it was involved in every aspect of her life. And as a function of that, and it was just really heartbreaking actually listening to her realize that everything from her personal life, her social life, even her job life, her decision to become a mother, everything had really fallen apart. And I felt like I had to wake people up to smell the roses, as it were, and make hopefully people realize how important the sense of smell is. And that gave me the idea to, and the impetus and motivation to write this book. And then my next book, believe it or not, is called That's Disgusting. It may not seem related, but actually disgust is a taste-based emotion. And as you all know, our sense of smell is really intimately connected to our experience of flavor. And so that book also really explores how emotion is influenced, and especially disgust, and is influenced by the situation and how we interpret meaning. And that's exactly also how smells dictate our perception and our emotions. It's how we interpret the smell that gives it the meaning, that gives us the emotion, and so forth. So disgust and scent are actually related at this sort of fundamental theoretical level. And then my most recent book is called Why You Eat What You Eat. It's everything you wanted to know about food and your eating experiences. And of course, the senses are hugely involved in that, as is psychology and our social behavior, our emotions and our brain. They kind of tie everything together there.
I think we'll all be ordering that book, Rachel, coming out of the pandemic, because COVID-19 has taken on a new meaning. I think it's that 19 pounds that some of us are carrying around. But yeah, wonderful books. I've read your first book. Totally fascinating for those of you that haven't met Dr. HERZ before, but incredible research-based, really preeminent expertise. And I think the other takeaway from your comments is every Zoom call I get on from now on, I'm going to be putting on my fine fragrance in addition to burning my candle so that I can adjust my, my behavior and my mood. So I think that's a actually interesting marketing technique we should all take away. I'm going to come back to Laura SLATKIN because in this vein of how are people using fragrances differently, how are people using products differently, boy, Laura, since we were first working together, you've expanded into all kinds of new areas, bath and body, and even a new initiative in home diffusion. Tell us about your expansion into these different areas and how is the client responding, particularly during these times?
Well, you know, we're always looking for innovative ways to fragrance space. And I was approached by Pura, who manufactures a device, a plug-in that you can operate from your smartphone. And we formed a partnership to launch this product. It's Nest powered by Pura, as we describe it, but it's actually a plug-in that you plug into your wall, but you can operate it from your cell phone. And you can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can change the fragrances, you can change the intensity, you can do a myriad of different things. It can be a night light, you can change the colors of the lights. It's actually very cool. And we launched it last September. And I didn't know how the consumer would respond to it. I had no idea. I thought it would be a long sort of learning curve for them, and I wasn't sure. But we launched it, and the demand for it was unbelievable. In fact, in my 25 years of being in the business, I have never seen a product launched with such appeal. Just there was such a huge demand. I mean, every store I went into for a personal appearance, people would come up to me, oh, you know, because we were always out of stock because we didn't order enough. And they would say, you know, when is that Pura coming back? I get texts, I get emails, I get phone calls. So actually, it's a really fun way to fragrance your home. And, you know, when we start going back to work, economical too, because you're definitely saving money because you're not using the fragrance while you're not there. You're turning it off. You know, it can actually turn on and off automatically when you leave the house. So it's kind of cool that way.
Totally cool. I love the fact that you can actually, in anticipation of being home, go ahead and put it on. So it's ready for you. And
ready for when you enter, walk in the door, it's smelling like grapefruit.
In the door and you can smell it. Yes. And I've been so proud to be a board advisor to Pura from the beginning and delighted that you're working with them and have done so well. So just another example of how consumers are elevating their use of fragrance in their surroundings. And Pura in particular is awesome because there's actually 2 opportunities for fragrance, not just one. You can actually switch back and forth, which is really also fun. So bravo on the innovation there. And yes, go ahead.
Well, you know, and then it's been interesting to note that some of our traditional products like liquid soap, our scented liquid soaps, you know, we have liquid soaps in all of our home fragrances. And obviously those have been extremely popular since COVID-19 set in. We also have a dish soap and a all-purpose cleanser for the kitchen, which has been fun. I mean, I've used those products because I'm cleaning the kitchen every night. And so it's been interesting that, you know, people really want to use scent today, you know, in many different ways. There are now regular liquid diffusers in their bathrooms, and, you know, just people really enjoy having home fragrance with them right now.
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful growing category that you said yourself, you know, years ago it wasn't as well adopted, but now it really has become such a mainstream part of everybody's life around the world. And speaking of all things around the world, turning back to Dr. Herz, we had a conversation about, as you go global with your brands, what can we expect? Because scent perception is not the same everywhere you go, as I came to learn from Rachel. Tell us.
So yes, so just like I was saying before, it depends on the associations that we've formed with a scent that determines how we'll respond to it and the emotions that it evokes. That works on the individual level, and it works culturally. So, you know, your example of lavender being relaxing, that's because that's how it's connoted, that's how we've learned it, that's how marketing reinforces its, you know, perception. But when it comes to actually, especially what I find so interesting is some of the home fragrances or product fragrances and how widely they vary. So just as two interesting examples, the scent of musk and the scent of jasmine. So musk and jasmine are cleaning product smells respectively in either Latin America or India, and we in North America and in Europe tend to associate those smells with fine fragrance. And another example I love, because it's, you know, two countries separated by a common language, is the comparison of how wintergreen is perceived between the United States and the United Kingdom. And in the United Kingdom, wintergreen is actually really disliked. It actually gets the lowest ratings in terms of pleasantness when you give people a battery of common smells, whereas in the US, it gets, you know, one of the very top ratings. And that's because in the US, wintergreen is always connected with the taste of sweet, which is inherently positive, and it is connected to sweet treats and gum and so forth. And in the UK, the smell of wintergreen is bathroom cleaning products and medicine. So it's to do with our associations, and we can either learn them from our culture or we learn them through our own personal experiences. Sometimes we have both, sometimes they conflict. In any case, the most powerful emotion connection always wins.
Fascinating. Definitely to be considered. You wouldn't want to make that mistake between candy and bathroom cleaning. That would be a slip up. Thank you. So speaking of scents and emotions, you know, I'm so privileged to work with IFF on many projects in my scent marketing company. We create signature scents, and I'm often asked, well, how do you really decipher and determine what is the right scent for a brand? How do you create a signature scent? And part of it is the art of understanding the brand, understanding what the brand wants to communicate. But the other part of it is obviously the master perfumer who is really interpreting that. And then IFF has, as some of you may know, a sensory tool, which I just find fascinating. I'd love, Julia, if you would, to tell us about your IFF Scent Emotion tools. Very fascinating.
Yeah, this is one of the most fascinating, I think. I guess that when all of us, we enter in the business of scent making and scent producing, as Laura was mentioning, you know, this connection with the emotion is very, very strong. And while we do have, you know, experts to kind of tap behind the functionality of each one of the bases and the products, ultimately we are creating this for somebody to be using in their houses, in their bodies, you know, as a scent experience. So you need to put the consumer at the centerpiece of everything you do, and the emotions, it's, you know, it's connected to that, how you are evoking these emotions, and how the role of fragrance can really lead to, you know, these moments of relaxation, these moments of pleasure, and all of this. So it's really fascinating that IFF has it's more than 35 years of experience into, actually we were one of the pioneers of studying human emotions and the link between the associations between the colors and the emotions and the textures, and how this can be brought to the, you know, perfumers basically, you know, dashboard, and how they can actually co-create with brands, with creators, to really you know, fine tune and to find what is the perfect you know, mix. A powerful scent experience that is going to be evoking what the packaging, the product mix is talking about, but in a meaningful way. Right? I mean, you really want it to be resonating, and you want to create nice memories for the consumers, and this is what it's all about. So I think that this idea that scents, they go beyond their functionality, it's all about this reassurance, the comforting nostalgia, the joy, the relaxation. It's really fascinating to be working on something that is so invisible but so powerful when it resonates inside your emotions as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this sensory tool is really quite unique because it's just an incredible database of having validated what certain colors smell like, what certain textures might smell like, what even certain words might smell like through these thousands and thousands of people who have been researched over the years. So bravo to IFF for having that available. Just coming back to Laura, something that you had at one time that I just absolutely loved was a collection of very tiny candles. And you talked about how you would put them out at a dinner party, and they almost sort of enhance the dining experience. Have you noticed during this time, people being more at home, are they using different kinds of candles throughout their homes for different either moments, different cues, the beginning of the day, the end of the day? Are they putting something in the area where the child is learning, for example? What are you noticing your clients do? Are they buying multiple candles?
Well, I think in this particular time, people are going towards our classics. They're buying bamboo, they're buying grapefruit, they're buying Moroccan amber, they're buying ocean mist and sea salt, they're buying cedar leaf and lavender and Amalfi lemon and mint. These are some of our top sellers. They're also buying our new candle that we just launched, Apple Blossom, because it's so new and it's beautiful. But I think that they're returning to their old favorites rather than necessarily going with new things. So, and that's understandable because bamboo is a beautiful floral. It's our #1 scent and has been for 25 years. So there are a lot of bamboo fans out there. And I think during this period of time, they want to go with what they know. Then there's, grapefruit, which is such an invigorating and refreshing fragrance. It's a really beautiful fragrance that really lifts your spirits. So I think, and easy to be around and a crowd pleaser. That's one of the things about home fragrance is that, with everyone at home, you have to find a scent that everyone's going to enjoy. Some people don't like florals, but everybody loves grapefruit. So it's just been interesting that, and I've always told people, if you're entertaining at home, grapefruit is something that you should burn, or Amalfi lemon and mint. Again, 2 very easy fragrances for everyone to enjoy. No one's going to say, I don't like that scent, or I love that scent, because everyone's different. Everyone has different preferences. But I think that the tradition of looking at home fragrance and thinking about what am I going to burn in the kitchen? What am I going to burn in my bathroom? If you're closing the doors and you're taking a bubble bath and relaxing, you may want cedar leaf and lavender because it fills your bathroom with this aroma of a spa. And I think it was interesting to hear that, lavender may be relaxing for you if your memories go back to lavender as a relaxing scent. But traditionally, it's been a spa aroma that people relate with relaxing and spa moments. So I think, in the bathroom, sometimes it's really fun to burn an interesting scent that surprises people, that they don't expect when they open the powder room door. So I think people have a lot of fun with home fragrance. They fragrance wardrobe now in their home, and they enjoy that. Or they go with, the one scent and they're burning it day in and day out because that's what they love. I have a lot of friends that do that. I can't get them off bamboo no matter how hard I try.
Oh, that's a good thing. They're loyal.
Yeah.
Excellent. Julia, have you noticed, did your research show that there has been any issue with price due to the pandemic, or is the thirst and the price not an issue?
Well, definitely what we observed and what we know generally as, marketing people is that the prices, they come hand in hand with the idea of the price resistance, right? And ultimately it's a moment of resetting for the consumer as well. really focusing on the balancing the necessities and where you're going to be investing your extra dollar and what have you. So what we notice is more from the consumer perspective, that there is more the ability to choose between what they can find in the stores, especially in the outbreak moments, versus what they are exploring online. So this is something that we saw. There was a little bit more of a mix. This represented, of course, a new moment for the consumers to feel more educated on what they are, buying. So I think that simplicity, going back to the point that Laura was mentioning before, that you get it, it's the name of the fragrance, the variant, that it's evoking that scent. I think that this is the moment for us to pose a lot of reflection into decluttering things for the consumer, like really simplifying the message, especially when it comes to something of scent, that it's not necessarily something that everybody can fully articulate what it's, feeling and sensing. So I think that's the moment of creating this opportunities for the consumers to still experience their fragrance, but perhaps, in different dosages, in the minis that you have mentioned. I think it's all this trial products, we may see it increasing, and also considering that simplicity in terms of this evocation of the scent memories and the scent experiences is also something key that we always need to have in mind when we are creating. The other point is that there's a lot of disruptive brands that we see that they are born online, the direct to consumer. And so they're kind of tapping into one very specific pain point. So if you think about, Casper mattress, something out of the industry, and what they are doing specifically into delivering a mattress at your door, something that usually you would have to go to the store, rent a car, get the mattress on the top of the car. So they eliminated one big pain point. So the ability to understand what is the pain point, I think that those brands online, the indie brands, smaller brands, they are really disrupting in that sense, because they are understanding a specific niche of consumers. And that's how you also have more of this experimentation and I would say innovation in the industry as well.
Yes, thank you. And in our prep session, we talked about, the smaller sizes for sure, the experimentation before making the commitment. And even new forms of fragrance like incense seems to be making a return, something that in India, for example, has been used for thousands and thousands of years, and it's used in every home every single day as a part of life, and very affordable. So it's like a very affordable way to fragrance. Or as Laura said, the idea of the wardrobe fragrance. Now this is something that's a bit sort of more traditional, but I see it coming back. I see a lot more drawer liners, and I see wardrobe scents, wax panel, really interesting things starting to come back or to translate from other cultures into our culture.
Absolutely. And just to add one thing that you made me remember when we discussed is that usually we can learn a lot with our country, other countries. There's also an element of frugality innovation, which is basically the concept of what are, the things that you can actually do with low technology. So an example of India, because there's a massive low-income consumers there, so the industry has to find ways of providing the basic, hygiene and cleaning formats. The bar soap, usually the role of the grocery store is to basically, shave the bar soap into different pieces where the consumer is going to buy, with 10 cents what he can afford for that week. So while, this is an extreme case of poverty, that it's happening, but also it takes us to think of how can we facilitate that, for the consumers, because we are facing, I think the last time I checked, like 24% of unemployment in the US. So these are the things that we need to, again, put our brains and our creativity to really enhance the thought on how we are giving the fragrance experience to those consumers as well, in the same quality that that we can. But perhaps, as you were mentioning, formats is one way of doing this nicely and reaching out to those consumers in a different way, in a more meaningful way.
Yeah,
If I can just,
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something to what Julia was saying, that actually, you know, what I've been reading a lot about is that mental health is the next wave of this pandemic, because people are in really dire straits. They're losing their jobs. They're, you know, what Julia was saying about income and so forth, but also all the stress, uncertainty, and so forth. And I think that it's really important that we can promote using fragrance to do that self-nurturing, the self-care, the bringing people back to positive associations, positive memories, connecting with loved ones that they can't be with. So I see also this really important role now, in addition, and it doesn't have to be fine fragrance. It could be the smells of foods that your family used to cook or your mother used to make, or the smell of loved ones, you know, maybe the smell of your old house, you know, something along those lines. So I think that you can use all different levels of fragrance to really bring people a better emotional state. And I think that it's really critical now, and I think it's going to become even more crucial in the months to come.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Even with our businesses, we are seeing that they love their signature scents, but they're also wanting to bring aromas into certain areas of their real estate or their hotels that are giving and communicating different messages. So you're absolutely right on there. It'll be very, very fascinating to see what happens, especially Julia from a development standpoint, and Laura obviously from a commercial standpoint. So
Yep.
with that said, my goodness, I can't believe how the time has flown. Why don't we get into our final question, and then we'll get into some audience questions which have come to me on a text, so I'll review those. Rachel, let's start with you. Tell us about, what are some words of wisdom after all is said and done here today that you could leave our audience with, some thoughts you can share.
Well, this is a pop quiz because you never told me you were going to ask me this question. Okay, so I guess two things actually that I just came up with in today's conversation that I hadn't thought about before were, number one, how we can personally use fragrance to make ourselves feel good, look good, you know, present a more positive version of ourselves while we're, let's say, working online, having virtual meetings, having virtual conversations, and so forth. There's that element. We can also try to connect with, let's say, loved ones we're Zooming with or having FaceTime with, by maybe bringing a scent that, let's say, they wore or that's connected to them into the conversation, so that we, even though we're separated by miles and through a computer screen, can kind of help conjure that person through the smell that we bring to that meeting or that conversation, so that we can feel that we're more connected with them. And then lastly, I just think it's really important that we recognize the sort of emotional health of the nation and how important fragrance can be in terms of being uplifting and being emotionally significant and taking us to someplace else, at least momentarily, that we would rather be.
Wonderful. And Julia, tell us, what would be some of your words of wisdom to share with the group to take away?
Well, I think it was more, you know, with 20 years of experience in this industry, I think for me it was truly inspirational how the whole industry came together to manufacture, for instance, sanitizers for donations to first responders. This was the first time that you could see collectively, you know, our clients, our competitors kind of, you know, thinking together how we do more good and how we are, you know, engaged to look for quick and effective solutions, basically, on how we can actually help. So it's all about this repurposing mindset, which I think it was truly inspiration to see how we can, again, pivot into something that it's doing more good for the community, and how there is, you know, this part to play a role, you know, all of us that are here today in the Zoom on the experience and what we are learning every day, so we can better serve the consumer, both within this moment of the crisis, but also what we are calling, you know, the new normal, if you may say, so we can, you know, pivot the crisis, really thinking more into this simplified approach and the focus on the essentials. So I think that that is something that I'm taking a lot, the learning from the pandemic as well.
Thank you, thank you. And Laura, how about your words of wisdom for the group?
Sure. Well, I guess when it comes to words of wisdom, I always turn to my son, David SLATKIN, who is just turned 21 last week with his twin sister, Allie. But David is severely affected by autism, as you know, Caroline. He doesn't have any language. He has aggressive behaviors. He's cognitively very weak. And I get to see him once a month. A team of people come down to bring him to New York City. And I'm always challenged to find fun things to do with David because it's difficult. But one day my daughter had the idea to go apple picking. So the three of us went apple picking with his group of therapists. And we had such a magnificent day apple picking with him because he picked the apples, he put them in the bag, he skipped through the orchard. And it was just a glorious afternoon. It was just beautiful. It was a beautiful sunny day. And when I left there, I was inspired to create this new fragrance, Apple Blossom, which I said would benefit our organization, Next for Autism. And it was supposed to launch in April of this year. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And really the goal with Apple Blossom, with David in my heart, was to create a fragrance that would give us hope for a brighter future for individuals affected by autism. But when I launched it, with everybody all holding hands going through the pandemic together and experiencing the very traumatic impact on our health with COVID-19, you know, it became a fragrance that represented hope for everyone, not just people with autism. And I think that, you know, while it's a beautiful scent, you know, sometimes fragrances can really comfort you in this time. And there are so many people that, you know, have anxiety, depression, a multitude of mental health issues that get magnified during times like this, right? And, you know, listen, here's to hope for a better future for everyone. Because unfortunately, I think, you know, this situation is here to stay for a while. It's going to take us some time to get through it. So hopefully, you know, fragrance makes it a little bit more bearable.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's a beautiful story and a beautiful inspiration behind the creation of that fragrance. And it ties in also to Julia, what you were saying about the pandemic, you know, bringing us together in new ways for new reasons. Mm-hmm. In fact, on the heels, Laura, of what you were talking about, we've gotten some audience questions that have come in. And one of the questions is, how can fragrance help children with disabilities? And in general, how can fragrance help their learning? So I'm going to put that to the panel in general, because I think we could answer it in different ways through our different experiences. Would anyone like to take that on first?
Well, I just want to say that, and probably my other co-panel hosts are far more educated on this topic, but often when I'm doing a personal appearance, moms will come up to me and say, you know, I always burn a scented candle when my son has to study or my daughter has to study because it helps them focus. So I think that is a thing. And universities, they're not supposed to burn candles in universities, but my daughter tells me all her friends burn a scented candle when they have to do their homework. It helps them study and focus. I don't know if there's science behind that, but I know we'll hear about that.
So I think that's actually very true. And also I've actually done research where what we've done is we've connected a scent with something that people had to learn. And not only that, but also showed how it could change their motivation in terms of wanting to perform well. So depending upon the scent that's there at the time of test, or rather at the time of learning, if that same fragrance is there at the time of test, first of all, they will remember more of the material. It actually helps bring back more of the information. So a good little testing trick. And secondly, depending upon the emotional association, it can actually make people feel more motivated to actually be more persistent, to work harder. I'm going to not just skip this problem because I'm not really sure about the answer and I can't figure it out, but rather to try harder and actually do more. So it can be an excellent educational tool to use and encourage parents to really do this with their children if they have to, especially if they have to continue doing work at home, you know, homeschooling and so forth, bringing fragrance into different class activities, but you don't want to have the same fragrance for everything that you're learning. Otherwise we'll get all mixed up. So you want to have a different one for math than you do for English, than you do for Spanish, and so on.
That's really interesting. I can see a student with a collection of scented candles pulling each one out for their appropriate test.
I think there's something in there, Laura.
Yeah, I'm going to go to town on that one. Certainly with my daughter.
It's a good idea in there.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, there's a question that came up that seems that it's for you because it relates back to this really interesting point that you made about the scent association to memory. And the question is, if you had a negative memory association, can you change that association? How would you do that?
Yeah, so that's actually a really excellent question. And I've dealt with this with psychiatrists who are working with people who have PTSD, and scent is a really potent and terrible trigger for them. And it's actually reasonably difficult to overcome. but it isn't impossible. So in just the briefest terms, one of the issues is the first association we make to a scent is usually the most indelible. It's the one that we stick with. It's very hard to learn new associations. And the more powerful the emotional association is, the harder it is to undo and reconnect that smell. But if you could have a scent that is, let's say, connected to something unpleasant, you could, through a series of steps, and depending upon what the emotion is that the scent brings back. So in a more of a trauma-related case, what I've recommended to psychiatrists is that they try to first bring that scent in that's connected to the trauma in a very low-level way. So first of all, maybe not even using the scent, maybe using a scent that's kind of similar to it, or just talking about the scent if the person knows what the scent is, and then getting them to do deep breathing and relaxation while they're kind of getting okay with that level of being exposed to the scent. It's kind of a variation of what's known as systematic desensitization. And then you can sort of work your way up to the point where you're able to experience that scent again with relaxation, with deep breathing. And then once you've gotten there, it's again possible to make a new association. But you need a pretty strong positive to ultimately make it a positive scent if you have a negative connection to it. Because the problem is that negative emotions tend to be more powerful, just generally speaking, than positive ones. It's how we're built, because negative ones are much more important from the point of view of survival. If the tiger's running at you, you don't want to start, like, you know, singing away and not really being sure how to react. Whereas positive emotions, you know, they're great, but they don't have quite the same intensity. So it's really important to work to establish a very strong intensity positive emotion to connect. But depending upon what the situation is, you know, there are different levels, and depending upon who this person is, if they want to contact me specifically afterwards, I'd be happy to go into more detail.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for offering that. Another really good question, very pertinent. Does anyone have ideas about how to convey new product scents to consumers who are shopping online and trying new products for the first time? So obviously, Laura, you do such a great job at this emotional communication through the imagery you mentioned and the words. Are there any other ways anyone can, on our panel, contribute to answering that question? How can we better sample fragrances?
Well, I think in general, sampling for us has been a big focus. You know, now that a lot of our businesses shifted online, Nest as a brand is heavily investing in sampling, and it clearly works, because I get notes on Instagram all the time. Oh, I received this sample and it smelled so good, I bought the candle, or I bought the fine fragrance. So that's key. But I think I go back to fragrance descriptions, and people are being rather sophisticated. And I think also it's important that when buying a fine fragrance or buying a home fragrance, that you buy the brands that are made by companies that have a deep expertise in the space, right? Rather than buying a scented candle from someone who's not in the business of home fragrance, because then you can really trust, you know, their scent descriptions and their expertise. So I think that's really important. But I think really paying attention to the ingredients, because I think we all go through such great pains to make sure that the fragrance descriptions really represent, what does this fragrance smell like? You know, sometimes I'll put ingredients in the description that aren't actually in the candle, but it perfectly describes the aroma that infuses the room. So fragrance descriptions are really important. And most people do, you know, have inspiration stories, videos, you know, what was inspired you to create the scent. Certainly the story I just talked about with Moroccan Amber would take you there, you know. So I think all of that is very helpful when buying fragrances online or selling them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something that's coming up for us as the stores are reopening and people are reemerging is how to really effectively experience fragrance in the store when maybe you want to interact with something, pick a candle up. So we're actually getting quite a lot of inquiries about store scenting, which is something that we do, and creating an ambient experience that's an invisible form of experiencing the fragrance. The other thing that is also coming up is how can brands who are doing more and more e-commerce convey their fragrance in a package? Might not even be a beauty brand, but how could a fashion brand put a fragrance into their box without it being liquid, without it causing any damage. This is something else that we've been working on that I also think is a strong trend for the future. If you're not necessarily a beauty brand, but maybe a fashion brand or another brand that wants to use scent to communicate a message. So these are most of the questions that we've had that have come in that we have time for today, but some other good ones. Sorry, we won't be able to get to them all. Thank you so much for sending those in, for taking the time. I'm going to now turn our event back over to Marianne. And I just want to say how marvelous truly it is to see all of these amazing faces, and to thank our really esteemed panel so much for your contributions today during this hour and a half, but also for all the time you spent prepping and all the time that you spent researching. It really, really means a lot to us. And I personally have really enjoyed this content. And in case you didn't know, I'm just a little bit excited about the subject of scent, a little bit passionate. And as I can see from your faces, so many of you are as well. So thank you for taking the time. So Marianne, over to you, and thanks so much again for being here.
Thank you, Caroline. You did a great job. Thank you very much. And thank you to the panel.
Thank you,
really,
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Karen, Caroline, Julian, IFF, Laura, and Rachel, what a fascinating conversation, especially during this time of COVID as we're moving through this time period. So I just wanted to say, great. It was very moving, as it's a very emotional time for everyone. Thank you. And I wanted to let everyone know that FGI membership is available at fgi.org on our new website. Our next event is July 8th with Jim Arnoff, career coach. And just a final thank you to our accomplished panelists panel, and for all the time and support on behalf of Fashion Group. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Marianne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.